Welcome to LinkedUp, Breaking Boundaries in Education, a podcast that focuses on what is happening in education today, connecting everyone to the movers and shakers that are breaking boundaries in the education arena.
Hey, Jamie, where are you? You have a different background today.
Yeah, I'm at the AASA conference in San Antonio. It's a fabulous conference. Everything's going really nicely. Met some new people. I'm taking Kathy Hurley's advice and just getting out there and meeting new people when maybe I don't feel like I am ready for it. But yeah, it's good. It's good.
That's a great piece of advice. And speaking of Kathy Hurley, she is the person that introduced us to our guest today, LK Monroe. And anytime Kathy says someone is incredible, we know it's true.
100%.
Yes. So this fall, we had the Women's Linking Leaders Conference in San Diego, and LK Monroe was our keynote speaker. And Kathy Hurley had said, you all have to meet LK. You will love her, and her message is fabulous. Well, she was not lying. We did love her. But Jamie, talk a minute about what her message was.
I feel like, and I think we've all been there. We think we can do it all, right? And we're expected to do it all. And sometimes it's okay if we can't. But regardless, we show up with, and LK is going to talk about it, a vest with an S on the chest.
That's right.
So let's hear more about that from LK.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm really, really glad to be here. I'm glad to see you two again. It's so good. I feel that same energy I felt in the room on that day when we all met together.
That was great. Yes.
During that conference. And, again, a shout out to Kathy Hurley because she is a masterful connector.
She is.
She really is. And I credit her with people that I call close colleagues and good friends. And so
absolutely,
really happy that we share that friendship. So this all started with a talk that I wanted to give because of my experience over so many years, being a professional and being a woman in spaces where either you're the only one or one of the few. So the talk itself is called Superwomanhood, the Maxim, the Myth, and the Moxie. And what that really talks about is the fact that, there's this maxim, this term superwomanhood that sometimes we put on ourselves or, that we adopt or is put on us. And then there are these myths about it, like the myth, Jamie, you were touching on it, that, that we can do it all, or somehow superwomanhood means that you have to be crushing it on every level. You've got to be the best at work. You have to be the best mom, the best wife, the best daughter. A lot of us are in those sandwich places in life right now. So, there's that. And then on the other end, there's this moxie, which really speaks to the strength that it takes to say, no, I actually need to set some boundaries. And I need to depend on my group, my tribe, to actually support me, to hold me accountable, to be like, okay, actually, I think you need a break. Remember when we said we were going to take some time off, or you had that vacation plan? So really having that strength, despite all of the things that every one of us as women is tasked with, to say, I have got to prioritize self-care, family care, above my endless to-dos. So that's kind of an overview of it. And it's something that I have seen and struggled with and continue to have to remind myself of as I walk through, I'd say every day, really.
Right. It's so many of the women at the conference could really relate to what you were saying, because I think I know as being a female superintendent in dinners with all men and being the only woman at the table, I was like, I am going to crush this. You're not going to think less of me. And we almost go to a point of just ridiculousness Well, what are we doing to ourselves when we try to crush it, as you said, on every level?
Right. And I think those of us, for those of us who've been superintendent, I am in my rewirement from superintendency beginning January 3rd. So it's, and let me first say, there's nothing wrong with showing up and really wanting to do well or doing the best. There's nothing wrong with that. Where it becomes a problem is when there's no balance, is when having to be the best means that you're giving up other things that are just as important or in some ways more important, that becomes your overarching focus. So show up at that meeting, do your very best, because as a woman that you need to present a particular way, you need to be on point. And when you leave that meeting, be assured of who you are and what your priorities are. And, in talking, that always sounds so easy. And that's why I talk a lot about invoking the tribe and getting support to do that, because we have to remind each other. And sometimes we can even remind each other as we're struggling with it. I may be struggling with something, but I can see what's going on for you better than I can for me. So
that is exactly right. And last week, I had the opportunity to speak at a women's breakfast, and I was looking everywhere for something. What do you say to all these accomplished women, right? And I found this quote by Brianna Weist, and I don't know if you have ever read any of her books, but they are truly amazing. They help ground me. But she said, self-care is not bubble bath and chocolates. Self-care is creating a life that you do not have to run away from regularly. And I thought, wow, I even had to repeat that again, because really that's what we need to think of, is how do we create that life that we don't have to get away from? And sometimes it's really the hard stuff, like setting boundaries on our spending, or, self-care isn't always the easy bubble bath stuff.
That's right. And let's not devalue a bubble bath, though.
That's right.
That's good. That's also good, but it's not all it is. You're right. Having that concept of self at the center. And as women, we often feel guilty for feeling like, oh my gosh, it's everyone else first. And, I absolutely believe that there's value in that, not so much everyone else before me, but in service, and in service to others. And we all know that in every area of our lives that we show up best to serve others when we're whole, when we're taken care of, all of that. You're mentioning, Jerri, the women's breakfast reminded me of the last time I was able to talk to a group of women, California superintendents and administrators, about Superwomanhood. And I had a woman who came up to me after, and, I give this talk and I seek to have it be inspirational and, galvanizing for women and in some ways inspiring. And a woman came up to me in tears afterwards. She's like, I really needed to remember this. I really did. I am just trying to do the next thing. I'm working so hard and I really needed to remember this. And, part of what I say is that, self-respect shows up in a lot of different ways. And in your workplace, I give tips for how one can establish that environment, set those boundaries. And then at the end, I also say, it may not be possible everywhere you are. It may be time for you to look to make that next move. But even if you're not, you should always know your self-worth. And that's your self-worth as an individual in your soul and in your personhood, but also your self-worth as a professional. What are my skills? What's my value? And never forget that, because there will be people who will try to remind you of what your limitations are.
That is true. That is true.
I really thought that, it's important to consider what you just said, like establishing that environment. I feel like we're always on this track and we just go, and we don't often get time to be reflective. And I think the way you described that woman who pulled you aside afterward, she realized that she does not get off that track. And you were able to pull that attention to her. But what are some of your tips for really creating that environment? So that way, and it kind of speaks to what Jerri was talking about too, something we don't have to escape from. And LK, you said sometimes there are, instances where it's going to happen, but what are some suggestions for doing that?
Absolutely. The first one, one of the first ones I've already mentioned, which is making sure that you doesn't have to be a big group of friends, but 2 or 3 friends who you can call when when you're in one of those situations where either you don't know what to do or you have that gut feeling like, this is what I should do, but I'm feeling like maybe, that group of trusted friends. And, I often think of those as women, but we have a lot of allies out there. With our male friends who in some ways are uniquely qualified to say, no, this is what I would do. I wouldn't.
Right.
Like, why are you even stressing about that?
Yes.
This is what you need to do. Another thing that I talk about in the workplace or in our professional settings is really making sure that you communicate to people what your boundaries are. And that doesn't have to be in a way like, you don't have to show up and say, okay, I have a boundary here. I don't want you to, but to be able to, in the way that you work, in the way that you talk, in the way that you share in meetings, for people to understand how you hold yourself and what you will and won't do. There's not a formula to this. Every decision is its own. But if you have in one of the jobs that I had in the past, was working for a mental health organization as their a chief academic officer. And then we talked a lot about an internal working model. People should be able to see, understand, and know what your internal working model is. They should be able to say, oh yeah, LK, she's not going to go for that because, she holds this value. We honor other people's time and hers, all of those kinds of things that end up being your signature practices, if you will. And people get to know that. I think the opposite of that is when we are chasing what pleases or what we think will get us ahead. So there's always that balance. There are things that you need to do at work that will put you in a good position. But you would be surprised at the end of your career or, after you have spent a couple of decades doing something. It's those limits that you set that identify you more often than what you say you will do. It's, I don't really know that we should do that. So I think those are a couple of things. There are many more that I'd be happy to share with your listeners. But it is this inside out sense of who you are and how you want to be perceived.
Take the time to be reflective and really set those boundaries, but kind of do it collaboratively and with a tribe, as you mentioned too. Yeah. Great.
Absolutely. This is the other thing that I lead with during this talk. You'll remember that I started the talk with some music playing in the background, and I wish I remembered to bring my vest, but I have one that I travel with because Alicia Keys has a song, Superwoman, and there's a line that is a refrain for me every day, which is, even when I'm a mess, I still put on a vest with an S on my chest.
Oh,
I just think that's something we all need to remember. Like, you don't have to wait to be this perfect person. None of us are.
Right.
So even though you're struggling, you still know that you're showing up for kids, for your family, for your friends in the best way you possibly can in the moment. So
even when you're feeling you're a mess. Absolutely. And what I love about that too is, you really talked about the importance of having a tribe, and your mom helped you create that vest, didn't she?
She sewed the S on it for me.
She sewed the S on.
She did.
As they do.
She's been my superwoman throughout my entire life. And, in small ways, I think, when we look at the people who influence us, it's often not, like, they didn't leap a tall building in a single bound. Like they they showed up and made your lunch every day when you were a kid. They, when you were feeling down, when you were a mess, they were there for you. They were that tribe member who was on the other end of the phone. And those are the super moves, the small ones, the consistent ones, the continuing to show up as you.
And I think mothers too also help us clarify our values. They remind us, who we are in those times where we may feel really down on ourselves. They help us to clarify that.
And I love that. And on both sides, they'll, as we're young,
yes.
maybe adolescents, they'll be like, you're feeling yourself now. I can see you. Let's dial it back.
Yes.
So they can speak truth.
That's so funny. My mom used to say, "You're showing yourself." That same thing. Yeah.
And that's important too. That's
right.
Because they are trusted. You may not feel it at the time, but you remember those things.
So. Absolutely. Yes. Well, okay. Since we last talked to you, you've had some big changes.
I have.
In your career.
That's right.
Bring us up to date.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, consistent with our consummate superwomanhood, all of us, I am what I like to call, and it's a movement. I actually thought I coined this term, but I didn't. There are a lot of people who talk about like rewirement, because a lot of us who are, chronologically retirement age have so much more to do, so much more to lead for, to say, to help with. And so for me, that absolutely is the case. And this allows me the opportunity to do something that's been passion work for me always. But now I have the time and space to do it. So I started my own firm. It's called TeamedUpforGood, and it has a nonprofit arm called the OLO Community Foundation. OLO stands for Organized to Lead Our Community Foundation. And, I often talk about where a passion to lead and change things comes from. And sometimes it comes from really good experiences that you've had that you want to share with others and lead from. Other times it comes from this place of dissatisfaction. And for a lot of us who have been, quote unquote, in the system for all of our lives in education, there's a whole lot of barriers that exist to actually getting kids and families what we really want them to have. A lot of times it's, it's the budget, it's regulations, it's compliance, it's the political nature of particular things. So I really wanted on this side to be able to implement the things that we know work in real time without those barriers. So the purpose of TeamedUpforGood is to, with the support of athletes and artists, stand up educational initiatives in the communities they care about. So I'm working with 2 professional athletes right now, and we are looking at working with actually the NBA Players Association to set up programming in key communities, mostly urban areas, through Sports Camp is the lead-in, but there is technology, and then also a follow-up with youth participatory action research and work-based learning and all kinds of things that, it's like the culmination of all the things you've done in your career that you can say, okay, now I'm bringing this to kids now, and working people have the resources and the and really the passion and the motivation to see it happen.
This is amazing, because a lot of times, you may have been a part of initiatives that were sort of like a one-time thing, or maybe you got to do it only so far. Now you're dedicating everything to make it all that it can be and be sustainable. This is so exciting. Wow.
Yeah, it's, I mean, talk about being excited to get up every day. And, when people often ask you what keeps you awake at night, this does, but in a good way, because I'm like, okay, so this is what we could do. This is how this would work best. And the thing about it is, leading up to this, I went and visited the Harlem Children's Zone and talked to people who are doing some of this work. And we often hear about place-based initiatives, which are powerful to take a community or a neighborhood and really invest and wrap around them in particular ways. The Harlem Children's Zone is the gold standard for that in New York. But I really have been thinking a lot about face-based initiatives. Like, what if we really start truly from the inside out? Like, we start with what we know and want to see for a single child, then that child's family unit, then that child's thinking about all their educational, sports, extracurricular activities, then their community. So if we look at it that way and build out, as a school system, we can't often, teachers can, but as administrators, we can't often really look at it from that level. And it is really gratifying work at this point in my career to actually be able to, step back and touch kids and families.
Yeah. Is this something that you had thought about for a while? You said you're rewiring.
Yes.
But how did this come to you, this idea? Because it's fascinating.
It's so there, when I have, as we all do at this point in our career, I have many mentees. And one of the things that I will tell them is, it sounds trite, but it's so true. Never say never. It's, I often would say when I was superintendent, I was county superintendent in California, I did not, play on the block. I didn't play county superintendent. Like, this was not a career goal for me. I could not have seen this in my future, but you continue to walk through doors. And as you look back, you can see, oh my gosh, that experience that I had absolutely informs this, that place I found myself that maybe I actually hated at the time, that job or that experience. I'm like, because I did that, I know how to do this. I used to, early in my career, I worked with someone who was a sports agent and supported professional athletes. So, I got to know that world a little bit. And then I was a late career teacher. I started teaching when I was 40. Because I'm a third generation educator, and I was pretty much convinced in my youth there had to be a better way to make a living. I grew up in my mother's classroom. I was like, oh gosh, I'm not doing that. Full circle, never say never. Ended up doing that. But before that, I had my own businesses. I had a desktop publishing business when computers were new, and started a technology training institute for teachers. So I always knew the power of, I have always called myself a social entrepreneur by passion, of taking an idea and trying to figure out how to change a social condition, improve a social condition through that kind of innovation and inspiration. And, experience with technology, experience with people, experience with leadership, systems leadership, all of that I feel like led to this moment and this opportunity. So
just connecting all of those dots together.
Yes. Like, can you think about at the beginning of your career, like, if where you are now, what that plan would have looked like, what you would have had to put in place to get every experience that you have now? You couldn't have conceived of it. You really
right.
So,
and I think you're right that you just have to really be open to new ideas and not say, this is where I'm headed and I'm only going to do this, because
exactly. And you say that sometimes along the way, and then you're like,
you do.
Okay, maybe I have to be a little more open than I want to be. I actually remember when being assigned to my first school in Oakland Unified as a principal. I was assistant principal at a K-8 school, and I was assigned to a school that I hadn't interviewed for. I'd interviewed for a host of other schools, and they had chosen me, and they were communities I felt most comfortable with. One that my family grew up in, and I was assigned to a school that I knew nothing about, and it was the last K-5 bilingual school in Oakland. And I like to refer to my level of Spanish as pleasantries plus. I talked to you a little bit about the weather, your kids, that kind of thing. But I said, oh my gosh, I am in no way qualified to lead this school. Why would you put me here? And my boss at the time said, whom I'm still really great friends with, he said, so you will be the third principal in this new school's 6-year history. It's like they have had 2 Spanish-speaking principals before you. This is a fractured community. What they need is someone who can bring the community together. You'll figure out how to traverse any language barriers and how to observe instruction in Spanish, mind you, but they need something more than that. And so I was still not open to it for a while, but, you know, after careful introspection, a lot of prayer and counsel with my tribe, it's like, all right, this is an opportunity. And I'm so glad I took it. It really blew a lot wide open for me in terms of understanding culture and instruction and so many things. So,
and he saw in you something you really didn't know you had, maybe.
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
And I think someone believing in you that way makes a difference too, that they saw that in you. And then you really want to show them, yeah, I can do this.
It does. And, you know, and I think that brings up something, and this is along the Superwomanhood lines, is that, you know, courage is not the absence of fear. It's acting despite it. And so we are often very afraid. And if you're not afraid, you might not be taking any risks, which is really important to growth. And so that kind of courage, just to say, okay, I don't know anything about this, but you believe in me, and I'm going to take a leap and see where it leads me. So important for us as women, for us all, but really for us as women, where we tend to want to be ultra prepared for the next step we're taking. We want to make sure we got all our ducks in a row.
Right. And you just can't be prepared for everything. And I think sometimes when you do take the risk, some of the teachers start appearing in your life. If you're looking for them.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, the risk taking is key. Having that courage to do so is key. Because otherwise, if we sit in complacency, you're never going to have those unknown opportunities that exist in your life. And it is so true. You know, looking back, you may not realize it in the present, but when you're able to look back, you can say, wow, having done that, just like you said, really it is what has brought me here. I have these new skills that I didn't realize I was accumulating. I mean, the same thing happened with me when I was, you know, a mom. I took off from working to be a mom, and I was happy to do so. I did some part-time, I actually started a business. I didn't take off, and I did part-time work doing coaching and mentoring, professional development. But I was also vice president and president of our education foundation. I always thought I wanted to be on the board of education, but then I really found a passion to be part of, you know, our education foundation. And I ran that for 10 years. And I kind of just thought that was, you know, whatever. And, you know, but then I look back, I mean, those things that I learned, that I did, those skills, running these events, doing these community building things, that's what I'm actually doing now. And I did it for 10 years. And I realized, oh, I've done this before. This is not my first rodeo now, because I thought it was just a soft skill thing that I was building, but it was immense, really. So it is. It's really fascinating to see every experience you have is a learning opportunity and builds you.
And you said that several times, and you just said that too, Jerri, with the teachers that you meet along the way, but learning. I think that is really the key, being open to learning at every stage. I am, like, every day in this new venture, I am learning so much. I've been at it for 6 weeks and probably pivoted 3 times from what I thought the path that we were going to take to get here has been, because I get feedback and we have to iterate. Like,
always iterations. Yeah.
I actually can't say that to athletes, because that doesn't, you know, they just hear want. Like, when I'm talking about educational things and what I want to set up for kids, they're like, actually, what we want to know is what you're going to do, what the outside is going to look like. We'll show up, we'll help you. I'm like, okay, I need to. So it's just all of those things, and being willing to learn, and being willing to change. It's so funny. People think of learning happening when you're young, but I think we are often much more open to learning as we get older and understand that we know less than we thought we did when we were young.
Right. And to remember that you learn from everyone. They don't have to be a proclaimed teacher. As superintendent, the person I learned the most from was my first year on the job. We had an ice storm that shut down schools, and the custodian led me through the journey.
Okay.
I mean, thank goodness for that man. He led the journey. I had no idea what to do. And you just learn from everyone. Everyone you meet knows something you don't know.
It's amazing. And you're right that our teachers come in sometimes from the most unlikely places.
Right. Right.
That you think they will. So that openness. But I think of the, the hubris and the kind of confidence of youth sometimes that I think,
Yes.
oh my gosh, I thought I knew so much and I knew zero. I didn't even know what I didn't know about that. Yeah. And it's so freeing to be able to show up, in a meeting. And this is a little bit about this feeling like you have to show up with all the answers. I mean, I think that there is an art to developing how to show up as a learner who's a leader.
Oh, yes, that's
and not
powerful.
everybody in the room is going to understand that. I remember early on people saying, "Oh, she doesn't know what she's doing. She asked us." So, a lot of that is really creating that culture and leading for that culture. We used to talk about that at the Office of Education, which is we are a learning organization and we will ascribe to the tenets of a learning organization. And a lot of that is being vulnerable, being willing to make mistakes, being willing to ask questions. All of those things that you don't necessarily get points for on the job are things that make that.
And I think when you show that vulnerability, you start to create a culture of trust. That if, as the leader, I can show you I'm vulnerable, then other people at the table can show their vulnerabilities, and it becomes more trustful.
It absolutely builds trust, and it's also about being collaborative in nature. To be a leader, you have to collaborate, and that allows for that that learning type of atmosphere for sure.
Yes.
Pivot and grow.
Well, LK, as we talk about mentors and people we've had in our lives, I had a mentor that would always ask me this question, and we love to ask this question on the podcast. So, speaking of Superwomanhood and your new career, all the things that have been happening to you, like in the last 6 months, really, what has become clear? That's the question.
So much.
It's a whole other podcast.
So a part of the story I didn't share is that as county superintendent in California, it's an elected position. And I had been in the role for 8 years, run 2 times successfully. And then this third time, because of a lot of changes and political pressures, and it's a hard job in that I had fiscal oversight over 18 school districts. And sometimes that's a popular place to be, and sometimes it's not a popular place to be. So it required me to get clear about a lot of things going through that process where I had an opponent and I did not win this last time. Now, quite honestly, it was a real struggle to think about running for a third time. I wasn't sure, but I decided to do it. But in going through something that is so challenging, getting that clarity about absolutely who you are and what's important, here's what I remembered. So on election night, because during the pandemic, most places in California and Alameda County is no different, switched to mail-in for a lot of their ballots. You don't actually know for several days what the outcome is. So I was on election night, I was winning. Everyone was congratulating me. Within 3 days, the results started to change. And I remember on that, when they started to change, within a day after that, I thought, I might be able to contemplate a new future for myself. This job, I have put myself in this position where I felt like I couldn't be free from what I have held in this job and vision what I'm doing now. So I allowed myself to do it. And I had 6 more months of my term to serve, but that kind of clarity about, so actually remember what used to get you up in the morning. Remember the passion for the creativity of serving kids and families. Remember that was where you started. And it's become about politics and compliance and programs and the pandemic and, all of these things. And I was able to, it was like this anvil got lifted off of me. And, still very much wanting to make change in the space, but it reminded me that, oh yeah, so I'm a creative person. I love doing creative things. I'm doing more of that now, bringing that back. And just realizing that, you should never forget what your core inspiration is. And I had probably not forgotten, but definitely, it was under layers of should. And must. So
Yes.
anyway, I am clear and happy.
I think it's so interesting because it really just speaks to what we've spoken about this whole podcast, because you were able to take those, go back and look at what really moved you, what your passions were, but then take that chunk of time that you spent in that role and use all of those skills that you developed to take your passion from the past and now put it together into this amazing entrepreneurial, social entrepreneurship. Is that the way you phrased it?
Yes.
That you are providing now. It's incredible. It really, really speaks to everything. It's great.
Yeah.
And I think it exposes one of your core values I'm hearing is resiliency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I believe it for our students. I believe that it's the key to transcending so many of the challenges they have, but in any given moment, being able to say, it's not as simple as lemonade, like, oh, we got lemons, let's make lemonade. It's like, okay, this is a key part of my journey, and it feels horrible right now. It's really painful in this moment, but I know, as so many others in the past, that this is going to elicit something that I can't see right now. So.
Wow, what a powerful message, and what a role model you are.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I believe the same of both of you. I mean, again, back to this learning, like when we were at that conference, I learned so much, and the least of it was technology. It was what inspires each of you and how you came to the path you're on. So.
Right. Exactly. Oh, it has been such a pleasure to visit with you and catch up with you again. I'm certain our paths will cross again soon. And I can't wait for that, because it's always great to see you and hear what's going on. And we will really watch your journey and what happens in the road ahead. It's exciting.
Unfolding every day.
Yes, absolutely.
We were really looking forward to having you today. And now we're looking forward to having you again to hear about all of the amazing success that is happening for these kiddos that you're supporting. Very exciting.
I cannot wait. I can't wait to share it with you again. Thank you two so much for creating this space, for continuing to have these really important conversations. On leading up to this, I was able to watch several of these, and they're really great.
Oh, good. Well, you're our 101 episode. 101. Yeah, we're celebrating.
The Dalmatians. There you
are. Yes. Yeah.
On the 101st. That's significant. So.
You are. We've turned the page, and we're
really good to kudos to you both. Really.
Well, thank you, and thank you for joining us today. And where can people find you online and follow you?
I'm at our website, which is being developed, the 26th of February, it will launch. You can go and find just our mission statement at TeamedUpforGood.org. TeamedUpforGood.org. So, and I'll show you, we just had our cart. So you'll see this logo TeamedUpforGood.org. So we're a social purpose corporation, and stay tuned at the end of the month in a couple of weeks for the full website to launch.
Oh, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we are wishing you the very best on this journey.
Thank you. Enjoy your day. Look forward to seeing you soon again.
Thank you for listening. And if you would like to stay linked up, be sure to follow us on Apple and Spotify, and subscribe to us on YouTube.